Hello, everyone. It's Denise from Dobby Books. And as you can tell, I've kind of lost my voice. I have a tendency to get laryngitis fairly easily, so this is one of those times. Some of you did see my post from a day or two ago in which I looked absolutely ravishing. I ended up back in the hospital because I had got something stuck in my esophagus. It would not go down. It was yogurt with blueberries. Yogurt. I took 3 small spoons and I just noticed that it wasn't going down. It was just, accumulating. So I stopped eating. And 4 hours later, it was still there. So I ended up going to the ER to let them know. And they did their preliminary treatments and it didn't quite go away. So I had to stay overnight. And the following morning, which was yesterday, I had an endoscopy done. And they found that there was a section of my esophagus that had narrowed. And what they do is they put a little balloon there and they expand it, and that helped to contract it. So now that little section is open. And I have to admit, I'm a little gun shy about eating. So I'm chewing the heck out of all my food and I'm taking really super small bites. I just don't want to go through that again. So another thing, today, after I think at least 2 years, I finally got to go to my favorite library that always has a book sale every Saturday in their bookseller. So I'm going to show you some books that I got. And later I made a stop at Barnes & Noble because I had to get a book for my book club. And for some reason, I think I got the wrong one, but I already started reading this book and it's fascinating. It's got my attention. I'm going to finish the book and I'll double check to see if I've got the right one. First, let me show you what I got at Barnes & Noble. Let's get that part done. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Okay. So I went to Barnes & Noble and I got the book that I thought we're reading for our book group, The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon. And it's a mystery. It's a murder mystery. And this is set in the 18th century in a town in Maine. And the woman is a midwife. And being one of the only medical sources in the village, she is asked to examine a body that's been pulled from the river. And there's a story going around about that this was one of 2 men that had raped a young married woman just some 4 months before. So this is what eventually happens is there's a new doctor who butts in, basically sort of condescendingly looking at the midwife and saying, well, I'm sure with my advanced degree I'll find the source of, the real story behind his death. The midwife had already found out that he'd been beaten, hanged, and then thrown into the river from very obvious observation. And this doctor apparently decides that it's an accident, and she knows he's wrong, but she's figuring, why would he say that? What's he covering up? So she begins her own investigation. It sounds like a fascinating book, The Frozen River by Ariel Lawhon, and I believe this came out. Let me check it's by Vintage Books, and the copyright is 2023. It's a cool cover. From the Good Morning America Book Club. That's what that says. And then the next one that I got, we were talking with some of the people in our book group, and I don't know why I have a feeling that I've already told you this, but I can't seem to find any evidence of this on one of my prior videos. So if I repeat myself, I apologize. We were talking in our book group, because we all go to a different group on Thursday mornings, and we only meet once a month as a book group. But some of us go to this Thursday morning group for another purpose. And for some reason, the Da Vinci Code came up. And just so you know, this book group takes place at a Catholic church. Oh, hold on, the kitty's meowing. Hey, Mama. But for some reason, we all started to talk about the Da Vinci Code. And those of us who were actually from the group, from the book group, I think there were 3 of us in this discussion group. One of us said, she said, I enjoyed it as a work of fiction because that's exactly what it is. And we were sort of marveling that people were taking it as a work of nonfiction. And as they continued to discuss the story, the novel by Dan Brown, one of the women said, I did see the movie as well, but the book is so much better. And that got me because I've only ever seen the movie. So now, because she said the book is so much better, which is the general rule, I said, I got to read this book. I've never read the Da Vinci Code. When it came out, I just wasn't interested. Now she's piqued my curiosity. So I said, well, I'm going to go see if I can find it at the library. I think I completely forgot to look for it. I couldn't find it where I was looking, and then it slipped out of my mind, and I looked at a bunch of other things. So when I went to Barnes & Noble, I got the Da Vinci Code, only to find out that this is part of like 5 books in a series, I think. And this is book 2. Well, that's it. I can't read this until I read book 1, which is Angels and Demons. The only thing about these 2, I don't know if you noticed, well, let me show you. They're a different size, which disappointed me because there's such pretty books. I want them all to match. But this book and the remaining books that I found, this particular book, the Da Vinci Code book, this is vintage press. But this one book in the series, Angels and Demons, the edition that they had at my Barnes & Noble, is from Emily Bessler Books /Atria. But all the other ones in the series are from vintage. And I just couldn't find anything. So, I thought, let me just get them both. And maybe one day if I find one that matches, if I find this one to match, the vintage one from this, I'll replace it if I'm still in the mood. If not, I'll live, right? So I'm going to read Angels and Demons. Then I'm going to read the Da Vinci Code. And I'm going to do this on the side. I'm curious enough now that I'm going to do this on the side. I don't know how fast or slow I'm going to go, but I am going to start this right away because I'm just so curious. So these are the 3 books that I got at Barnes & Noble. The Frozen River, and the 2 books by Dan Brown, Demons and Angels and Demons, and the Da Vinci Code. Now, back to the library. When I first walked in, I saw what I believe might be an original of the Penguin books, the orange covers. An author I don't know, a story I'm not familiar with, The Harsh Voice by Rebecca West. And I was trying to look up on my phone what distinctive features are in a first edition, first print of a Penguin book. And I think this qualifies. I don't even know if I'm going to read this, but if I have found myself a book that has some value to it, not just the monetary value, but the fact that this is an earlier Penguin book, then I want to have it. So I got this little thing, $1. I love these orange covers. They're very nice. Okay. I'm not even going to go into what this is about. We'll just put that aside. The next one I found is an author I never heard about, a book I never heard about, but the title caught my eye. Necessary Losses: The Loves, Illusions, Dependencies, and Impossible Expectations That All of Us Have to Give Up in Order to Grow, by Judith Viorst. Looks like a mass market paperback, so that's another plus. And I love what she said, what it's about it in the past. It says, it's hard to be hip over 30 and other tragedies of married life. Oh no, she has other titles. It's hard to be hip over 30 and other tragedies of married life. And how did I get to be 40 and other atrocities? Those are other publications. Now she's eased her journey to middle age, to middle age now turns her considerable talents to a more serious and far-reaching subject: how we grow and change through the losses that are an inevitable and necessary part of life, arguing persuasively that through the loss of our mother's protection, the loss of the impossible expectations we bring to relationships, the loss of our younger selves, and the loss of our loved ones through separation and death, we gain deeper perspective, true maturity, and fuller wisdom about life. Judith Viorst has written a life-affirming and life-changing book. I thought, I really think I want to read this. So I grabbed this. This was originally published in 1986. So I was in my early 20s. And who's this? Who's the publisher? I want to find the publisher. Probably they're not even around anymore. Fawcett Gold Medal, New York. So that's the next one that I got. The other one I found, The World as I See It by Albert Einstein. This is a collection of essays and letters that he wrote on various topics. And the blurb on the back says, The World as I See It is a companion volume to the Einstein Reader. Presents dozens of articles, essays, letters, and other correspondence written by Einstein between 1922 and 1934. These revealing pieces, not available elsewhere, focus on the human side of Einstein's accomplishments, covering topics such as the meaning of life, good and evil, religion and science, wealth, pacifism, the world economic crisis, Palestine, and anti-Semitism. Also included is his letter resigning from the Prussian Academy of Science because of the increasingly oppressive political climate in Germany and the chilling response. I think this is very valuable, and of course you guys know I like publications of journals and letters, that personal aspect, that deeper aspect of a person. I love those types of things, and this falls into that category of sort of like maybe bios, memoirs type of category. The next thing I found is perfect for my medieval studies. The Lay of Marie de France. And this is translated by Glyn S. Burgess and Keith Busby. And it's a Penguin edition, of course. Marie de France, late 12th century, is the earliest known French woman poet, and by far the most gifted poet writing in the lay form, L-A-I. Short story poems based on Breton tales depicting a moment of crisis in a love relation, always intense and refined, and often far more complicated than our received view of courtly love might lead us to suppose. I can't read more of it because I'm going to wear down my voice, but this is going to be an addition to my Middle Ages collection because these were written, in the 12th century. I happen to be in that area. Okay. The next one that I found was another item, but I believe this is 1690, 17th century. So this is going to go into the late Middle Ages. The Memoirs of Gluckel of Hameln. This is very German, so I know I'm going to mutilate the title. And this is category of memoir under the category of bios and memoirs, translated by Marvin Lowenthal. Begun in 1690, this diary of a 44-year-old German Jewish widow, mother of 14 children, tells how she guided the financial and personal destinies of her children, how she engaged in trade, ran her own factory, and promoted the welfare of her large family. Her memoir, a rare account of an ordinary woman, enlightens not just her children for whom she wrote it, but all posterity about her life and community. And that's a snippet of what's written on the back. So I am adding this also to my Middle Ages collection, and I'm so glad I found so many of these under this particular genre. Gluckel of Hamel. Interesting title. And this, I believe, it looked like a Norton critical edition, but it's not. Schocken Books, New York, and it was published in 1977. The original copyright was 1932, and this woman lived from 1646 to 1724. The next one I found is another Penguin Classics by Soren Kierkegaard, Either or. A Fragment of Life. Either or is the earliest of the major works of Soren Kierkegaard, one of the most startlingly original thinkers and writers of the 19th century, and the first which he wrote under a pseudonym, as he would for his greatest philosophical writings, adopting the viewpoints of two distinct figures with radically different beliefs, the aesthetic young man of part one, called simply A, and the ethical judge Wilhelm of the second section. Kierkegaard reflects upon the search for a meaningful existence, contemplating subjects as diverse as Mozart, drama, boredom, and in the famous Seducer's Diary, the cynical seduction and ultimate rejection of a young, beautiful woman. A masterpiece of duality. Either or is an exploration of the conflict between the aesthetic and the ethical, both meditating ironically and seductively upon Epicurean pleasures and eloquently expounding the noble virtues of a morally upstanding life. This is a lightly abridged edition. It's an overall very good condition. The only thing I have complaints about is the spine. They obviously did know how to prep their books. But oh well, I'll survive. When was this published? This particular edition by Penguin was published in 1992. Then this one I found. Where did I find this? Oh, I found this at a different library, one I went to earlier in the week before I ended up in the hospital. This is a Penguin Classics edition, Jack London, Martin Eden. This is the one I could have sworn I already presented to everybody, but I can't find a video on it, so forgive me if this is a duplicate. I remember reading to all of you that this book, Martin Eden, is an autobiographical sort of book because Jack London claims to be the character of Martin Eden. And the whole premise behind it, I found out about this in a Substack article, which I'm going to put the link to if I can find it, where Jack London had basically a high school education. And there was a young woman who he would speak to who would bring to his attention his bad grammar and his lack of knowledge of certain basic classic names and works and things that he should have known if he were a little more educated, and this bothered him. He didn't want to be someone who worked so hard all his life. So he absolutely focused and fully dedicated himself to self-education and getting himself to a point where he would have the equivalent of a college education. And I don't remember if he did this in 3 months or 6 months, but it was a remarkably short period of time. And his goal was to become a man who could make his living with his writing. So he focused on reading great literature and copying great literature so that he could become a good writer himself. This is what Jack London claimed he did. And he wrote a story about that experience and gave his character the name Martin Eden. And I was so intrigued by this article that I immediately started looking for this book. And I really couldn't find it. And I happened to be at this other library looking through their little bookstore shelves, and there it was. Oh my gosh, I was thrilled. So I found it. And it's in great condition except for a slight, like someone, bumped it here, so it kind of bends it. But other than that, This book is in excellent condition, and they haven't even done anything bad to the spine. So I'm very happy I found that. By Jack London, Martin Eden. And when he published this, it was in, let's see if I can find it for you. Martin Eden was published in 1909. The next one I found at this library is a Penguin publication as well, Dictionary of Literary Terms and Literary Theory. I have a small book on literary terms, and you all know how many books I have on literary theory from a previous video. This I loved. It had both contents in there, but it's so much more comprehensive in its explanation. Condition of England novel, concrete universal, oh gosh, hermeneutic of suspicion, irregular ode, and a German word that I can't pronounce to save my life, kitchen sink drama, magody, malapropism, all these terms that I'm finding in here that I haven't found anywhere else. Comedias de ruido, noisy plays. This really has a lot of just fantastic, terms I've never heard of, but I know they're going to be very handy, and it's really comprehensive. So I decided to take this one home. And this was US price $15.95, UK price $9.99. And this was published, this particular edition was published in 1991. This is a great reference. As you know, I love references. For some reason, I'm just very nerdy about references. So this is going to be added to my reference shelf, which is right there. And then this I got, which is perfect, because I was just reading, again, this book, The Demon of Unrest, which was our book group. I never made it to my book group that night because I was in the hospital with that thing stuck in my esophagus, so I never got to enjoy the discussion. But this is about the events leading up to the Civil War. And of course, Lincoln is mentioned in that. And I found this book on Lincoln, Behind the Scenes in the Lincoln White House, Memoirs of an African-American Seamstress, Elizabeth Keckley. That's awesome. I love these primary sources. I live for these primary sources. And this was, let me see about Elizabeth Keckley. It says Behind the Scenes by Elizabeth Keckley, formerly a slave, but more recently modest and friend to Mrs. Abraham Lincoln. Or the other title, 30 Years a Slave and 4 Years in the White House. When this particular one was published in 2010, I'm curious to see when this actually, I don't know. It's a very straightforward kind of book. I'm not getting a lot of notes or anything coming out of here, but it's dated. It'll, it dates it, and then the location of where the person is at the time. I don't even know at this point if she wrote it herself, if she dictated it to somebody and they wrote it for her, but I know I'm going to find out. It says Behind the Scenes in the Lincoln White House, Memoirs of an African-American Seamstress, tells the story of Elizabeth Keckley, a former slave who became a successful Washington, D.C. dressmaker and confidant of First Lady Mary Todd Lincoln. This intimate bond allowed Keckley to witness the happy times as well as the tragic events that unfolded within the Lincoln White House. Keckley's post-Civil War life story is part slave narrative, part gossip column, part Horatio Alger story. Though Elizabeth Keckley lived longer as a slave than as a modiste to Mary Todd Lincoln, most of her engrossing autobiography is devoted to her White House years. The opening 3 chapters establish her as a woman to be reckoned with. The school of slavery, as she calls her bondage, taught her to be fiercely self-reliant, persevering, and defiant, though more than one slave master tried to beat her into submission. having worked as a reputable seamstress for 3 years while also performing her full-time duties as a slave woman. She finally managed to buy freedom for both herself and her son. After a brief, unhappy marriage, she began her rapid social ascent from seamstress for the Solid South's best ladies to Mary Todd Lincoln's best friend and confidant. Isn't this awesome? You're hearing it from the actual person who lived during this time. I just love that. So, bios and memoirs, there's another edition. Let's see. And there's a story I read. You know what? And this is what's so silly. I can't even remember if I read this story. I know I saw like a made-for-TV movie. But it's just racking my brains trying to find out if I recall reading this story. I don't own the book. Maybe I read a library book. I don't know. But the point is, I really liked this story. It intrigued me. And I remember watching the made-for-TV movie and crying at the end. It just really moved me. And there's so much more to this story. The Mayor of Casterbridge. I don't know if I found the book. I might have the book. But this is the Cliff's Notes on it. And I'm going to read the novel first. Then I'll go back and explore some of the Cliff's Notes because it has questions in there and discussions that I really want to cover because I want to delve more deeply into this. There's just something about the Mayor of Casterbridge and his life and his experiences. And the sad, end to his life. The first thing I thought to myself is, it didn't have to be this way. So much of his life didn't have to be that way. And if any of you have read this story, you're going to understand. There's part of me that's saying he had a choice, and he just reacted, that first instinctive reaction, whether it was anger or hurt or pride, and it just turned everything. It's such a bad direction. And he had such good people who loved him and who admired him, who looked up to him. But it's like he couldn't hold on to that. There's so much more. Once I read The Mayor of Casterbridge, of course, I'll cover more. And maybe I'll even include some of my thoughts and reflections based on what I capture in here to tell you, and I can give you a proper review. It's still bugging me. I have to see if I have a copy of The Mayor of Casterbridge. So I got a Cliff's Notes on that. This goes under reference. Now, you all know that I was reading The Demon of Unrest, and I gave my review on this. And I wanted to find the book by Mary, what was her name? It's hard, C.H. Chestnut. There was a woman named Mary Chestnut in this book. Now, this is real life. This is a narrative history. And one of the people in here is Mary Chestnut. And she kept a journal which she planned on publishing, but she passed away before she could do that. So it was published posthumously. And I found a good edition on eBay. I should have had it by now, but the person who sold it to me, it appears they waited a few days before they even got it out in the mail, so I don't have it at this point. But what I ended up finding at this other library, where I found the other books just now, is another diary, Sarah Morgan, The Civil War Diary of a Southern Woman. This is also very thick. This one is how many pages? Excluding notes, it's 612 pages. And this woman lived in Louisiana, whereas Mary Chestnut, I believe, was in South Carolina. A little snippet on here. Born into one of the best families of Baton Rouge, Sarah Morgan was not yet 20 when she began her diary in January 1862, 9 months after the start of the Civil War. She was soon to experience a coming of age filled with the turmoil and upheaval that devastated the wartime South. She set down the remarkable events of the war in a record that remains one of the most vivid, evocative portrayals in existence of a time and place that today make up a crucial chapter in our national history. This was published by Touchstone, and this particular edition was published in 1991. So I know when I get into my Civil War era in my chronological history studies. I will be reading this. I might take a peek on a few little entries before that time, I'm sure, because I'm too curious. But I'll have this Civil War diary, and when it arrives, the Civil War diary of Mary Chestnut. So that'll be awesome. Fantastic. And because I'm collecting the Newbery Medal winners in children's literature, I found two at the other library. This is a Newbery Honor book, and it's called Hawks Hill by Alan W. Eckert. And the blurb on the back says, Ben was not an ordinary 6-year-old boy. He was much too small for his age, and he seemed to get along better with animals than with people. None of the people in North Corners knew quite what to make of him. Then one June day in 1870, Ben wandered away from his home and on Hawks Hill and disappeared without a trace into the waving prairie grass. How this shy, lonely boy survived most of a summer in the wilds by forging a bond with a female badger is a poignant story of human courage and change. That looks like a beautiful story. So I got that one. And the next one I found isn't a Newbery Medal winner or a Newbery Honor book. It just really caught my eye. By N.D. Wilson, 100 Cupboards, and this is only book one. And this is what the blurb says on the back. See, you see the eyes staring at you? I think that's a kitty cat, but I could be wrong. And this is what the blurb on the back says. Lying in bed at night, 12-year-old Henry York can't ignore the thumping and scratching he hears on the other side of his bedroom wall. He scrapes off the plaster and discovers doors, 99 cupboards of all different sizes and shapes. Through one, he hears the sound of falling rain. Through another, he sees a glowing room with a man strolling back and forth. Henry and his cousin Henrietta soon learn that these are not just cupboards, but portals to other worlds. Oh, that's it. That did it for me. I got the book. These are all, this was 50 cents. Awesome. And I think this one as well. Yeah, 50 cents. So I think I'm trying to read a middle grade book every month. I might just sneak this one in, for May. Well, there's that one. The other two I found today at my favorite library, and this is a Newbery Medal winner, Dear Mr. Henshaw by Beverly Cleary, illustrated by Paul O. Selensky. This one is by Harper Trophy. Lee Botts has been author Boyd Henshaw's #1 fan ever since he was in 2nd grade. Now in 6th grade, Lee lives with his mother and is the new kid at school. He's lonely, troubled by the absence of his father, a cross-country trucker, and angry because a mysterious thief steals from his lunch bag. Then Lee's teacher assigns a letter writing project. Naturally, Lee chooses to write to Mr. Henshaw, whose surprising answer changes Lee's life. Dear Mr. Henshaw by Beverly Cleary. So that's another addition to my Newbery Medal winners. And the last one I found today is A Gathering of Days, a New England Girls' Journal, 1830 to 1832, another Newbery Medal winner. And on the back it says, I, Catherine Cabot Hall, aged 13 years, 6 months, 29 days, do begin this book. So begins this journal of a girl coming of age in 19th century New Hampshire. Catherine records both the hardships of pioneer life and its many joys, even as she struggles with her mother's death and father's eventual remarriage. Catherine's indomitable spirit makes this saga an oftentimes uplifting and joyous one. Quiet yet powerful, this award-winning book is sure to touch all who read it. There's a companion book, Brothers of the Heart. This is by Aladdin Paperback. And I think this was originally, let me see, I forgot to look at the previous one. This was originally published in, where is it? 1979. Dear Mr. Henshaw was published in 1983. The 100 Cupboards was published in 2007. And Hawks Hill was published in, oh, there's a little red card in here, in 1971. I think I might have gotten this not from a different library. I think these two came from the Open Book. That's right, these came from the Open Book, another independent bookstore. And those other two came from my favorite library. So that's, oh, no. And last but not least, you know, I've been on a bit of a cookbook craze. I found such a great book. I had learned not too long ago, partly on my trip to Europe, and then again when I saw a documentary on TV. Northern Italy is very different from Southern Italy. Southern Italy was more poor and less educated. Those immigrants came to the United States when there was the big, immigration of Italians in the US. Northern Italians didn't come here. They went to Argentina. I don't know why, but that's where they went. Which to me explains why the Argentinians have an Italian lilt. It's an Italian melody to their Spanish. And it makes it a little difficult for me, who am fluent in Spanish, to understand them. They have different expressions and stuff too. So I wondered if their Spanish, I'm sure this is the case, if their Spanish is a blend of Spanish and Italian. So that would be it. But when we were traveling in Europe, after we had left the Netherlands, came through Holland, we were approaching Italy, and we started in the north of Italy. And our tour guide, Maddie was his name, told us that in this part of Italy, it was so close to Germany, for example, that many of the people who lived in that part of Italy, and I hope I'm not getting this backward, many people who lived in that part of Italy considered themselves German. It could be the other way around. And I thought that was very interesting. And it's sort of tucked away in the back of my mind. And today I found this book. It's a beautiful book, by the way. It's called The Splendid Table: Recipes from Emilia Romagna, the heartland of Northern Italian food. It's a big hardback by Lynn Rosetto Casper. And there's a picture of the author. Look at the cover. Look at the inside cover. It's just so beautifully done. And so this is a map of Emilia Romagna, this area of northern Italy. I don't know where it borders. And even the font and everything is just so beautiful. Look at this. My husband said, when I told him the original price of this book was $30 when it was originally published in 1992, he said the cover art and just the beauty of the book itself is worth the $30, he said. Beautiful font. And look at this. So this is Emilia Romagna, that part of northern Italy that this cookbook, tells us about and shares the recipes for. And then I want to show you these. Some 19th century engravings are shared. So this is more than just a cookbook. It really is it goes beyond that. And of course you do get some pictures of some of the recipes. Of course you're going to get that in a good cookbook. Look at this. Look at this baked item here. It's just beautiful. Look at the inside. That looks so good. Oh my gosh. So does that. But I think you can see someone wrote comments here in lovely penmanship. Wonderful, used with linguine and no garlic. For this particular recipe here, you can see the writing of the previous owner. See that? I think that's, and she wrote in pencil. Very good. You don't want to write in pen inside your books because it bleeds through to the other side many times. And if it doesn't do it right away, it may do that over the years. And this is Parma, Italy. Here we go. This book is filled with history and food and conversation, and I just thought it was fantastic. It really is. It's a unique, oh, look, someone left a card in here. I guess they were trying to find a book, Stranger in a Strange Land, Dune. And they had it marked with this recipe here, sweet cornmeal biscuits. Gialetti di Romagna. So maybe that's a really good recipe and I'll have to try that out. What a lovely book. And back here, I guess they're discussing wines. Oh gosh. This is history and food and travel. Oh, this is just a beautiful book. I'm so glad I found it. I was not going to get it originally because I thought, when am I ever going to cook Northern Italian food? But in the end, I chose it because it really is a beautifully put together book. The Splendid Table by Lynn Rossetto Casper, and I believe I told you this was published in 1992. So that's it, everybody. These are all the books that I got. Have an enjoyable weekend, and hopefully my voice will come back soon enough. Maybe, I don't even know if I mentioned, maybe I have the laryngitis because of the endoscopy I had. I have a tendency to get laryngitis, so whatever. I've got it. I have to go to work tomorrow, so I hope it improves. I will see you all in just a few days. Don't forget to push like and subscribe. I love you all, and I'll see you a little bit later. Bye-bye.